Okay, so very good morning to all of you. And then this is almost our last chapter actually. So again, okay. So chapter 12. After you learn on chapter 11 is actually you will know that what we have and then why we need all these rules and regulations. Okay. So for chapter 12 is environmental legislations and also the management in Malaysia. So all of us are actually, forced under, um, we are forced under, we are forced under the Environmental Quality Act 1974, okay? EQA 1974. So all of us are actually, is actually like in our life, no matter what happens, all of us are actually being secure or guided or monitored by the guidelines. So no matter how powerful you are or what you are doing, so we actually having rules and regulations in our life. Okay, right. So, hey, so for chapter 12 and chapter 13, the course learning outcome is actually only for CL01, which is just to define the concept and elements in the environment. So as long as you know what is the rules and regulations and then how we work on that, then this is enough. So this is mainly just for your basic understanding and also the introductions. Right. So when it comes to the introductions, okay. So in how you define as environments usually, okay. So for EQA Environmental Quality Act 1974, it's defined the environments as the physical factors of the surrounding of the human's being include land, water, atmosphere, climate, sound, odor, taste, and the biological factors of the humans and plants, and the social factors of the aesthetics. Okay, so no matter it's the biological factors or humans factors, but then it's everything that having surrounding us, no matter you can see, you can touch or not. Okay, so when we say about environmental law, it's something that is very complex because it cut across a number of the disciplines. So the environmental protections relies on the criminal and also the civil law, and it also includes the negligence, nuisance, and trespass. It heavily influenced to the town and country planning system. Okay, so don't think that when you are doing something wrong, it's no criminals, but then actually for environmental law is actually relates to the criminal and civil law. Both are co-related to each other. So for this, the rule and regulations of the environmental law are based on international, regional, national, local legislations, and also the decisions making. Okay, so and then next, what is the definitions of the pollutants? How we said some things that how we said this is polluted or not. Okay, okay. So when we talk about pollutants, it means that any substance that whether is liquid, solid, or gases, which directly or indirectly change the quality of any segment of element of the receiving environments. So means that some things that no matter is in a liquid form, solid form, or gases, is changing or it also be harmful or hazardous to you. So it's hazardous or potentially hazardous to health and include the objectionable odors, radioactivity, noise, temperature change, or physical, chemical, and biological change to any segment or element. Okay. So the history of the Malaysia environmental legislations is actually there are three phases. So from the first starting is actually in 1970s. So in 1970 is the enactment of the EQA. So that times we are use it to manage the environmental problems once they occurs. So we are not proactive, but then we are proactive. So when something is happening, then only we go to solve it. Okay. So the EQA also emphasized the remedial actions to respond to the emissions from new factories that built at the start of the Malaysia period of the rapid industrialization. And then in 1918, so 86, the EQA amendments on the EIA. So we go on the prevention. So we start to have the awareness and then we start to prevent. So the preventive measure and the introductions of the quality control on the forms of the EIA of certain development projects. And then when it's come to 1990s, the EQA amendments, so there are self-regulations. So management to achieve the sustainable developments and then influenced by the international standards. Okay. Great. So these are the selected environmental agency that we are actually having the relationship with each other. It's not only for the Department of Environments, but then also involve others departments or others agency. Okay. And then these are the sources of the environmental laws coming in. So where it's coming in is coming from the federal constitutions. So and then the statutes, subsidiary legislations, the environmental guideline, national policy on the environment, and then the principles that governing the environmental law. Okay. So for the federal constitutions, we actually having three things. So under the ninth schedule of the Federal Constitution, the natural resources were divided into three lists. So we have it into three lists. First is the federal, second is state, and then we have the concurrent one. Okay. So for federals, we have number 9, number 11, and number 20, and 25A. And then when coming to the state, we have 2, 3, 6, and 12. And then coming to the concurrent, we have number 3 and also number 5. Okay, so for the statute, there are actually more than 40 environments related registrations on Malaysia statute, which the government seriously governs by the variously federal and also the state bodies. So the laws that pretending to the environments began with the Water Enactment in 1920. So the first rules actually coming in starting from the waters. So in 1920. So although there are several earliest laws in the form of ordinance during the days of the street settlements. So the major legislations is the EQA 1974, which provide for control of pollutions through the licensing. This means that the license holder can pollute the environment subject to the conditions stimulate, and then failure to obtain such license could cause the party in default to be liable to a fine and imprisonment. Okay, so we have first is actually inland water pollution. How we define as an inland water pollution is actually in section 2 of the UQA. It's defines the inland water, the water that coming in as any reservoir, pond, lake, river, stream, canal, drain, spring, or well, or any part of the sea that above the lower water line along the coast. Okay. So DOE also record that the industrial and the domestic discharge as the major contaminants to the water pollution. So this is the definitions from it, and then you can go through it by yourself because this is actually more to a rules and regulations. So I'm not going in detailedly. Okay, so you can just go through by yourself. And then these are the related provisions that relates to the water related waters enactment in 1920. So this is sections 25 for the EQA. Stimulate the restriction on the pollutions of the inland water, how we set as the inland water pollutions, and then how we find it. So no person shall, or unless licensed, emit, discharge, or dispose any environmentally hazardous substance, pollutants or waste into any inland water in the contraventions of the acceptable conditions specific under sections 21. Okay, and then we have sections 277, and then also the latest water enactments we actually been changed into Water Act, which is we try or we revise it in 1989. So which is only applicable to the several states, which is Sembilan, Pahang, Perak, Selangor, Melaka, Penang, and federal territories. Okay, territories, right? But then, because the water is actually is a state asset, so every state governments actually have their own right to change several part of it, and then also to change the rules and regulations regarding the water. Okay. So number four, for the local governments, in Acts in 1976, incorporate the provisions on the pollutions of streams. So section 69 is said that any person who commits a nuisance or deposit any filth in or upon the bank of any stream channels, public drains, or others water course within the local authority area shall be guilty of an offense. Okay. Okay, for number five, sections 86 of the Street Drainage and Building Act 1974, any pools, gutter, water course system, water closet, water seal, latrines, prevent urina, septic tank, sewer or drain or fall or in such stage can be nuisance or injurious or dangerous to health. Okay, so this is one of the examples for one of the cases, okay, is PP versus NCK alumni exclusions in River Heights. So the respondent had been convicted under the 25(1) EQA. So the respondent submit their appeals before the sentence was imposed. So that was the first offense that the level of harmful material found was minimum. Furthermore, it was submitted that appropriate actions have been taken to remedy the situation. So those governing institutions, as there are various registrations which contain the matters pertaining to the pollutions of inland water, there are also several bodies that empower to deal with such pollutions. So except the EQAs, the subsidiary legislation which is under the power of the DOE, we also having a penal codes that is under the federal governments. And then also we have the Water Act 4 under the state governments. And then also we have the Local Government Act and also Street Drainage and Building Acts that under the local authority. Okay. Okay. So just now is for inland water. Then now we change into the coastal water. Okay. So I'm more giving you the example on the water and then air pollutions act. Okay. So we have everyone's. So for coastal water is actually a section 2 of EQA define Malaysia's water means the territorial water of Malaysia as determined in accordance with the emergency ordinance number 7. And then for number 3, the ordinance state that the breadth of the territorial water of Malaysia shall be 12 nautical miles, and such breadth shall be measured in accordance to the articles 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 13 of the Geneva Convention. Okay. Okay. So what type of coastal pollutions that we have? So first one we have the land-based pollution. Second is the dump at the sea. So you can, I'm sure this one you knows what is the land-based pollution. It means that coming from all the land use or any sewage or even coming from us. Okay. So for dumping at sea is like something who that throw some things when you go on cruise or even when we having taking out from our petroleum and then there is an incident or the spillage of the oil. Okay. Right. So the sections that the provisions that relates to the coastal water pollution is actually we have sections 27, section 29, and then also we have the Oil Pollution Act in 1984, and then also we have Exclusive Economic Zone Act in 1984, right? Okay, so what is the governing institutions that having taking care on this is actually The QA is actually come on with the DOE. And then the merchant shippings, which is the oil pollution, is under the responsible of the Director of the Marine, that under the Ministry of Transportation. So however, the corporations from other government agencies such as Marine Police and Custom and exercise is needed for assistance to ensure that Malaysia water are safe from the pollutant. Okay, so after we have the water, now we coming into the air. Okay, so atmospheric pollutions can be defined as the contaminants of the atmosphere with the harmful byproduct of human activities. So the causes of the pollution is actually coming from vehicles, emission, smoke, and also noises. Okay, so these are the related provisions that we have relates to the air qualities. Okay, we have section 22, 29A, 29AA, and 29B. Okay, and then also we have another related provision is actually clean air regulations. So this is more relates to those we have with our open air. Okay, so applicable to any premise that use for any industrial or trade purpose or any facilities or the processes that discharge the air to the open air. And then also this one is actually the environmental quality control the lead concentration in the motor and gasoline. So in 1985, it set out the permitted level of the lead concentrations in the atmosphere. So this is why sometimes I'm not sure that either you be met or not. For Malaysia, sometimes you have a blocking, okay? So when you come into the blocking, it's actually, the blocking is not only happens that can be done by the police and also JPJ, but then actually the blocking can also be done by the Department of Environments. Okay, so when they done by the Department of Environments, actually, um, they mainly checking on the emissions from your car or from your motorcycle, right? Okay, so Sections 82 is a National Forestry Act. So this is related to our forests. Okay, no person shall kindle, keep or carry any fires or leave any fire burning within a permanent reserve forest in such a manner as to endanger such reserve forests. Okay. Okay, so these are also some others that related provisions that relates to the air pollutions. So Section 12 for the Petrol Mining Act, Section 82 National Forest Act, and then the governing institution. So for forestry is actually our forestry department. Petroleum is actually relates to the offshore land and also under the YADP, which is I forgot what is the full names. I will give it later. Okay. And then Road and Transport Act is under the Department of the Transportation. And this is mainly actually relates to Petronas, right? Okay. So and then we come back. Okay. So after we have in the waters, we have air, and then we have our soil pollutions. Okay. So this is the pollutions of the land. So the National Land Code defines the word as the land include that the surface of the earth and all substance that forming that surface, the earth below the surface, all vegetations and others are natural product, the things that attach to the earth. Okay, so EQA use the term of soil, which is defined to include the earth, sand, rocks, shells, mineral, and vegetations in the soil. Okay, so these are the types of the pollutions that may be happen from solid waste, hazardous and clinical waste, agriculture, and also developments. So the related provision is actually under sections 28, 24, and then TCPA, Toxic Catastrophe Prevention Act, sections 2, 6, 8, 18, and then land and conservations and the environmental impact assessment. Okay, so these are the subsidiaries legislations that we have, which is more relates to the air relates to EQA. So this is like the added or extra top extra rules or subsidiaries part of it. Okay. Section 51 of the EQA provides the Minister, after consulting the Environmental Quality Council, has the power to make the regulations relating to the environment. So more than the third regulations have been enacted, its beginnings from the environmental quality prescribed permits, crude palm oil, and then the latest one is legislations of the power, investigations on the erosions and sediment control. Okay. So why we need this environmental guideline and where can you get it? Okay. So the environmental guideline are documents that issued by the Departments of Environment pertaining the specific matter. Why? So it's actually the guidelines is to manuals in which a particular activity ought to be conducted, and then to specific as a regard operations that would require written permissions from the respective authority, and then also to outline as the step to be taken to prevent the environmental degradations. Okay. So these are the national policies that we have in Malaysia. So we have the national policy on the environment that actually been passed in 2002. So this is how we shows that our country is actually support to protect our environment. Okay, so the objective that would like to achieve from this national policy is actually a clean environment, safe, healthy, and productive environments for present and future generations. And the second is the conservation of the country unique and deserved cultural and natural heritage with effective participants by all the sectors. And then thirdly is the sustainable lifestyle and patterns, consumptions, and productions. Okay. So these are the principles that we have. So the stewardships of the environment, conservations of nature, continuous improvement, sustainable use of natural resources, integrate decisions making, roles of the private sector, commitment and accountability, active participations in the international community. These are the principles that we need to have by rulings, by hoping that when we provide the rules and regulations, some things that can monitor and then guide us through these principles. Okay. And then these are 7 green strategies that we can do. Okay, so we need to have education and awareness, effective management, integrate development plannings, preventions and control, strengthening the administration's protective approach. And then finally is the formulation and also how we implement it. Okay, so these are the principles how we governing the environmental law. So the first one is the sustainable development, precautionary principle, polluter pay principle, and then best practice, practical means. Okay, so what is sustainable development? So when we say about sustainability, it means the ability to sustain or to for us to continue to maintain. Okay, so we are obligated to do what we can to ensure that we leave the next generations a world that is no worse than the ones we receive from the generations that previous to ours. Okay, right? So what is the precautionals? So the principle is that if a practice carry an unknown risk of the catastrophic and irreversible, but it is uncertain how large that risk is, then the practice should be rejected until it is certain the risk is not existing or significant. Okay, so we need to know what is the risk. We can estimate something, so we can predict some things. This won't happen that when we've been used or doing that, but then it goes too long, and then it happens to the worst scenario. Okay, so polluter-pays principle. So it may be regarded as a response to pollutions and environmental harms rather than effective mechanism for the environmental protection. It is used as a financial incentive to operate more efficiently and then as a sanctions for carrying out the polluting activities. So those who actually, you are the polluters and you need to be paid for everything's all that related, all right? Okay, so the best practical means is actually reasonably practical, having the regards among other things to the local conditions. So this principle is actually refers to the use of the leading feasible methods to attain a particular goal. So it's very subjective in natures because sometimes people might think that this is very best practice, but then however when it changed to another country or another regions or another place or another cases, it might be a different thing. Okay, so we need to also actually look into the social and the economic factors. Okay, right. So that's all for these chapters. Is actually for this chapter is only to let you know what kind of rule and regulations that we have, and then so inside the Environmental Quality Act is actually not only once, but that it has to be very integrated. It has to be go through with others, and then also goes along with the others. Right? It's not only that it can stand alone, but that it needs to work together with others. It's just like yourself. Even when you start to working, you can't only work alone, but then you need to work together with others. Okay, so this is why I'm not going into detail because you are not going to be a lawyer or anything. Even after this, when you start to working, if you need to go for audit or any and become an auditor, you need to go for audit. You actually no need to memorize all of this, but then you will carry it. Okay, you will carry the EQA with you together. So I don't think it's necessary for me to ask you to remember everything, but then I want you to know that in EQA, we actually, for every elements that you learn in the previous chapters, especially like such as the case for the water, we have a specific rules and regulations for water. And then for air pollutions, we actually also have lots of rules and regulations that relates to the water. And then for soil pollutions, we have the ones. And then for waste, we actually have the waste one. So it's not only limited to one, but then it's actually integrated and then linked with all together. All right. So by hoping that at least you have the ideas, we actually are having the rules that protects our environments and something is actually under the monitorings and then guidance you through, right? So that's all for this chapter. So if you have any questions, you are free to ask me through any platforms that we have or any platforms that you can contact me. All right. So thank you, and I will see you again in the next lectures. Bye.